Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. If anyone is not being paying attention, I'm not Stefan Bender, who was supposed to be third presentation, just in case. So the idea here is to make a different kind of presentation. What I'm going to show you is what we have done at the Bank of Portugal, share a little bit of our experience in creating this microdata research laboratory, which is relatively recent. I mean, economic science has now taken as granted that heterogeneity is a fact, that you can no longer admit that there is a single agent, the representative agent, and therefore you can see it across every area in international trade, in finance, in labor, that heterogeneity has become a central issue. When it comes to the empirical side of economics, that means that you need to account for heterogeneity. And you need to account for heterogeneity, either the observed heterogeneity as well as unobserved heterogeneity. And to do that, you need to have good data. You need to have panel data. Well, there is a large trove of administrative data sets, which by construction, they are ideal to construct panel data because there are several reasons. First, they usually are mandatory, they cover the whole population, they have identifiers for the individuals, and they have a lot of information. I know that, for example, here in Chile, you also have that kind of excellent administrative data sets that you can leverage for research. And if you put that together with the ability to combine information from other sources, other administrative data sets, then the range of questions that an economist can tackle, I mean, they are almost unlimited. And this is the ideal setting for any economist to be able to use this kind of data, and hopefully the research that comes out of that can give a much better grounding to any economic policies that are followed. Now, access to these microdata sets, as was referred before, it's not easy because there are many constraints. And one of them, I mean, there are several of them that I'll quickly refer. First, you have to be sure that data is accessed for the right purpose. The right purpose that I have in mind here is data being accessed for research purposes, because that data has a lot of value. You also have to make sure that confidentiality is safeguarded. I mean, if you're giving access to researchers, you still have to worry about that issue. When you are dealing with these very large and complex databases, you need to realize that it's not enough to simply make the data available to researchers, because there is a lot of knowledge that needs to be built around those data so that they can be explored effectively. And that takes time to acquire. Also, we need to be aware that simply just making the data available for the researcher is not the ideal situation, because you will have to take a lot of time preparing. The cleaning that most of them have referred, sometimes they have to do it over and over again. The same researchers have to do it over and over again. I mean, there was an estimate, I think was by Patel in a book called Data Jiu-Jitsu. And in the book, he estimated that the time that researchers take when they are working with a large data set, they usually spend about 80% of their time cleaning the data and 20% of their time effectively doing the analysis and doing the graphs and all that comes with the fun part of working with the data. Of course, other restrictions have to do, they are more physical, like you cannot simply use your laptop, the software that's required, it's not, I mean, you need to have access to the right resources. And one thing that's not also mentioned is that these techniques have evolved in recent times, and researchers are not automatically endowed with the knowledge to treat the data. I mean, they need to be trained. I mean, a lot has been happening in recent years. There is a lot that needs to be learned, and so it's not that easy to start manipulating the data. Or just making available data is not enough. I mean, you cannot simply give the data, make the data available and expect results to come, even if you have a researcher in front of the data. Well, my argument is that central banks are quite well positioned to provide this bridge between the research community and the data providers. And there are three reasons that I'd like to point out. I mean, many central banks collect and produce these nice micro-level data sets. Even if they don't produce it, often they have access to administrative data sets from other sources. And third, they have, most central banks, they have in-house researchers that work with these microdata, that have developed knowledge, that understand the needs of the researchers. So you can have both supply and demand together in the same institution, and therefore the central banks can be in a very good position, or are in a very good position, to be able to provide this data to researchers. I mean, that is the case of Bank of Portugal. I mean, Bank of Portugal has a long experience collecting and handling and producing micro data sets. This is particularly through our Department of Statistics. We also have an economics and research department that has a substantial group of researchers, some of the top researchers in the country, working with microdata level and with the Portuguese administrative microdatabases. And the Bank of Portugal, when it defined its plan, its strategic plan, it identified as one of the 4 goals to promote understanding of the Portuguese economy and European integration and contribute towards a better and more informed society. I mean, when you put all these together, it's natural then that you had BPLIM, the microdata laboratory, created due mostly to the vision of the governor, that's sitting there in the front page, the vision and the commitment of the governor. So the Microdata Research Laboratory is located in Porto. Over there, let's see, this is a picture of Porto, by the way. This is the branch of Bank of Portugal in Porto. We are located right there behind this building, in a small building that's not picture worth. BPLIM is a unit of the Economics and Research Department, but works in very close collaboration with the Statistics Department. In fact, we almost side by side in terms of our location. We sit in one office. Next door, we have people from the Statistics Department, and that has been proven to be quite helpful. We are a small team, just 6 people, but highly qualified. I mean, 4 of them have PhDs, 2 have masters. Most of them are researchers. We are requested to also do some research as part of our activities, and this is the team that we have. So what are the goals of BPLIM? I mean, the most important goal, the ultimate goal, is to support the production of microdata-based research projects about the Portuguese economy. I mean, this is the ultimate goal. We want to see more research done using these microdata. And how do we do it? First, we make available to researchers ready-to-use or customized data sets. We supply documentation. All of our documentation, by the way, is supplied in English. That was a decision we took right at the outset for a simple reason. We want to reach out to the research community at large to make sure that we can have access by researchers anywhere in the world. We also provide access to great computational power and software. We provide some technical and scientific support to the researchers. We do some training. I mean, we offer training in microdata techniques, and we do that in-house. Occasionally, we offer these courses on how to handle the data. And part that's also quite important for us is that we contribute to the development of young researchers. We receive students from local universities that come and work with us, and we teach them on how to work with the data. They help us with our projects, and that's also, we hope, a way to stimulate them to pursue a research career and use microdata in the future. So how does it work? So we have, in practical terms, it works like this, like any research data center anywhere. What we have is a submission system where researchers have to submit a project. They have to be credentiated. I mean, this is standard across any research data center. Once we have the, excuse me. Oops. Once the researchers submit the project, and once it is approved, we have to make sure that's a legitimate scientific question. We approve the project. We open an account, either in our internal server or our external server. So what is the difference? We have an internal server which is mostly directed at our internal researchers and projects that they have with their co-authors. In there, we place any data set. I mean, we have no restrictions on the type of data that we can place in that server. Then we have an external server. The external server is intended for external researchers. If one of our internal researchers decides or wants to access the external server, he is considered just like any external researcher. The advantage of working on the external server is that you can work remotely from anywhere in the world. I mean, you can connect from anywhere in the world, log into the account, and start working with the data. To my knowledge, we are the only central bank that is providing data access, remote data access. Of course, you may be wondering, okay, if you are providing all this access to data, what about confidentiality and all these things? Be assured, I'm not going into details, that confidentiality is preserved on the way we do things. And now I can explain to you later how we do that. What kind of data sets we have? We favor an approach where instead of just trying to make as many data sets as possible, we want to make sure that we make data sets available that we understand well, that we document well, and therefore we have a relatively small number of data sets, and this is the central balance sheet database. It's probably the most important in the sense that it's also the most demanded by the researchers. This covers, see, this one. The central balance sheet covers all non-financial corporations in Portugal, goes back to 2006, has lots of economic and financial information about all corporations. Then we have sub-products, so like a firm panel where we harmonize the whole data to make sure it's compatible over time. We also have a panel of establishments that we have created, and then just the plain annual data as it comes. Just for you to have an idea, we're talking about around 1,800 variables and close to 400,000 observations per year. We also have the central credit register for individuals and for firms. And so any outstanding credit in excess of 50 euros has to be reported to the Bank of Portugal. That's every month. So the information comes from 1999 for firm level and from 2009 onwards. Then we prepare some products. So these are pre-packaged products ready to use by the researchers. Then we also have the bank balance sheet database, some information on enterprise groups, like cross-participation by firms, so that you can understand what are the networks between companies. And we also have an employer-employee data set, which is only available to internals, and which provides information about the labor market. So these are the most important data sets that we have available there. We are, by the end of the month, we hope to have online website. You can try then bplim.bportugalpt. You should be popping up this website. It is online now, but it's a provisional one. I could click that and try to go to the website, but I'm not going to risk it. So in there, we provide information about all our data access and data sets that we have, the resources that we make available, because one of the things we do is we provide tools to analyze the data, some of the tools that we create, and we provide all the documents or auxiliary documentation regarding these data sets. We list all the projects, the events that we have on, and we also have a forum for discussion of any questions related to the data. So this is basically, it's a quick explanation of BPLIM. So what have we learned so far? I'd say that the most important things that we have learned when dealing with researchers, and note that when we set out to do this, we did not have any guidance. I mean, except for the advice of Stefan from the Bundesbank, which already had a research data center and did help us, but you don't have a guideline of how to do things. So a lot of that is self-learning. So the things that we learn is that you need to document everything. Document all the data, everything that happened, all the questions that you have. Document the problems with the data too. There is nothing more frustrating than getting access to a data set and asking, okay, so what is the definition for this particular variable that was used 5 years ago and no one knows? I mean, so just try to put everything on paper. That I think is a very important thing. Even internally, try to document all the procedures that you implement. I'll give you also another example where that's important to document. We have, when we are working, we need to produce several software tools like small routines. And I tell the people I work with, if you're doing that, I need a help file that describes exactly what that does. And I want, in some cases, I also want a little manual explaining, because tomorrow you may not be here. I want to make sure that whoever picks up is able to start working right away. And they understand that, and they try to document everything as much as possible. The other thing that I have learned is that you need to be as transparent as possible. I mean, what I mean by this is that researchers, they don't care if, this is my own perspective, if the data that we are providing them really heads up to the official statistics that are provided. What they care to understand is why there is a difference. So we have just to explain everything as much as possible, make it clear. And we do that in several ways by trying to bring about all that information, but we also do it in other ways. We provide on GitHub, we publish all the versions of the manuals that we do, so that you can always go back, see if there were any changes. We provide also versions of all the tools that we make available. So transparency is very important. Share knowledge. I mean, one of the things we do when we receive these data sets is that we try to document all the inconsistencies, everything that we find. I mean, we have very good quality data, but there is no perfect data set anywhere. And we share that with the researchers so that they know that there are problems with the data. I mean, but we also share that with our statistics department so that they can try to improve what is being done. We have the forum to share the knowledge, and we encourage any form of sharing, because if researchers find any problem, if they have anything, we encourage them to share. We have like frequently asked questions that we divulge on the website so that they don't have to reinvent or try to understand what's going on. We also found out that we have to keep learning. I mean, there's a big investment. Maybe we're not prepared for this. I'm an economist by formation, and this has been a big challenge to learn so much about handling data, and there has been so much change in recent years. There is only one way that we can do is just to keep investing in getting our skills improved. Luckily, we have the bank has committed itself to creating an Academy of Data Science, and the Academy of Data Science is something that will benefit tremendously our own staff and also researchers at the bank. So, finally, the other thing that we've learned is that researchers come in all sizes and shapes. And what I mean with that, when we interact with researchers, we find out that there are researchers that want just to make graphs, and they just want graphs. And there are other researchers that want to do sophisticated econometric analysis. And the only way that you can really address their needs is to understand what they're trying to do. And many times, and this is a situation that has happened a couple times, is that when you discuss with researchers what they're trying to do, sometimes you find out that you can overcome their confidentiality issues. I can provide you a quick example. Say that a researcher wants access to data, an external researcher wants access to data at the exposure level, credit level data at exposure level, which is, of course, highly confidential. Then we can talk to them and understand, why do you need that data? And they can say, I want to create an index to then join with another data set. And we can talk with them, okay, explain me what kind of index you want to create. And once he explains to that, we can be his hands or her hands and do it ourselves and then merge with the data. And that way we have overcome this, the question of confidentiality that was first posed. This is just a quick example. Well, we have, of course, many challenges ahead. I mean, one of them is increasing demand. We just came live with our website. I mean, we'll be coming live with our website. The number of projects is likely to increase. We are a small team. Therefore, we'll need to try to make sure we are able to answer all that increased demand. Data sets are getting larger. That is a question that, I mean, I have seen some of my colleagues working with the gigabytes and gigabytes of data, and I'm not sure that at some point we need to find out what we can do about this. We are not working on the cloud yet. but our informatics department is starting to go in that direction, and we want to follow them, see if we can start using more sophisticated tools that can take advantage of that. Another challenge is adding new data sets. Although we actively want to bring more data sets and there are more micro data sets at the bank, we'd rather do it slowly, because as we add data sets, we want to make sure that we understand them quite well, we document them well, we check the information and everything that is to be known about the data, and that takes time. We also have always the challenge of merging data. One thing that we do is we allow researchers to bring data from outside, and when they bring data from the outside, it's always a puzzle trying to figure out how can we preserve confidentiality and yet merge outside data, and this is always a challenge, and it's likely to increase. Finally, the other thing is, how do we add value to the data? I mean, think about it. We have access to very confidential information. That means that we can look at things that a researcher will never be able to see, but we can use that information, leverage on that access to that information to really add value to the data. We have done that in many examples. I'll just throw you a very quick example. The establishment panel level data set that we constructed is because we had access to information about the address of every single establishment, and we could link them all and construct an ID for the establishment, something that on the original data set was not reliable. Finally, one thing that is a big concern is the question of replicability with confidential data. I mean, journals nowadays, they demand that researchers, when they publish, that they submit not only the code, but their data. If you're dealing with confidential data sets, you cannot submit the data. So how can you overcome this thing and make sure that that publications based on confidential data can still be verified by a third party or certified by a third party when you have this, and while at the same time preserving confidential data? I mean, we are actively thinking, we're getting a workshop. We're preparing a workshop about this question of replicability, and one of the things that will be on the top of the table will be the question of replicability with confidential data. Let me just give you a quick look at our evolution. I mean, we started offering, in 2016 with 8 projects. So we had internal projects, are projects just with internal researchers. Mixed projects involve internal researchers with external co-authors, and then external projects are projects that have outside researchers only. And we started with 8 projects in 2016, then we went to 39, 75. As of June 2019, we already had 93 projects, 42 of them, 44 are projects exclusively with outside researchers, so researchers that don't have any link to the bank. Last slide, if you look at the distribution of researchers, you can see that roughly 1/4 of the researchers that used our data are internal researchers, and the rest were 77% were external researchers. Of those, we had 60% with a Portuguese affiliation, but 40% roughly with an international affiliation. When you look at the international affiliation, 70% in Europe, 22% are people from the United States, located in the United States, and roughly 10% are from outside of this, so Mexico, Canada, India, hopefully Chile. Thank you.